Buongiorno, siamo qua per la conferenza stampa di uno dei nostri film in concorso. Il film è Laundromat e prima di cominciare vi presento gli ospiti al tavolo a partire dalla destra in fondo. In fondo è l'autore del libro da cui il film è stato tratto, Jake Bernstein. Gary Oldman. Il regista del film Steven Soderbergh e MERYL STREEP. I am going to start with a question for Steven. Steven, how did you resolve the problem of making a film about a Panama Papers so brilliantly by not making a traditional investigative film, by creating this incredibly kaleidoscopic structure?
Well, this was a conversation. Oops, is that not working? Thank you. This was a conversation that I started with Scott Burns, the screenwriter. He was aware of Jake's book, and we started trying to figure out the best approach to present a complex subject in a way that would be memorable and would stick in the mind of the viewers. And we decided that a dark comedy had the best possible chance of remaining in the minds of the viewers, and also gave us the opportunity to use the complexity of these kind of financial activities almost as a joke, almost as the setup for a punchline. There were some precedents in cinema that we felt we should be inspired by. The most obvious, I think, would be Dr. Strangelove, which took a very serious subject and turned it into a very, very dark comedy. So that's what we were thinking, because we felt otherwise this would not be a story that people would feel they were being educated as opposed to being entertained.
The other thing you did is you did it all in 90 minutes. Yes.
It's short.
Congratulations, everybody. Stephen Schaefer, Boston Herald here. MERYL, wonderful performance with a big surprise in the movie that obviously we're not going to talk about, but can you discuss what attracted you to this character, and was the big surprise always part of the plan? And you've just had a huge success with HBO with the mini-series there, and now this is for Netflix. Do you see your home these days on the small screen rather than the big screen? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that question. Well, I'd wanted to work with Stephen for a long time because I admired his work, and I had confidence. What's happening? The further away I get, the louder it gets. That's sort of the opposite of life. And I felt that this masterful telling of something, the idea of entertaining people with something incredibly complex and true and dark and complicated, I knew that he could do it. He or Bertolt Brecht. Or Bertolt Brecht filtered through his body and mind. And yeah, I was really thrilled to be able to do it. And as for what screens, I think we'll all be appearing on screens right here soon, right? The size kind of doesn't even compute anymore. I mean, I'd rather see it big, but the kids these days, they don't care.
I'd like to add one question. Your character is sort of the emotional heart of the film. It's like she's the most visible victim, and we're all victimized by this, but she's the most. Can you speak a little bit about her and why she keeps going? She doesn't want money. She just sort of, just like the Energizer Bunny, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, what motivated I guess grief is a great motivator. The parents of the children shot in the Parkland High School, the parents of children shot at Newtown in Connecticut, those people don't stop. They don't stop trying to change the world. So I think she's sort of, if it's personal, you don't stop. And we rely on the people for whom it really counts to save us all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, it's Rodrigo from TV Globo Brazil. I have a couple of questions. The first question I would address to Peter Andrews, aka Soderbergh. Could you tell us a few words about the cinematography of this film? And the second question to Mrs. Meryl Streep. Meryl, I think it's impossible to watch a movie like this without thinking about the great American cinema of the 70s, which you were part. Could you tell us a few words about what you believe to be the legacy of that generation to a movie like this? Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Oh, my God. I'm really going to throw that over here because this is the cinemaphile right on my, he's the man who really can speak to that. I can barely remember the plots of the movies that I'm in. So, yeah, go.
Well, I think for any filmmaker of my generation, that period of American cinema from 66 to 79 was incredibly inspiring. There was a freedom, there was a boldness, and at that moment, we had this wonderful synchronicity of the filmmakers and the audiences. The films that were the best films of those years also were the most successful films. So for somebody like me, it felt exciting to be standing on the shoulders of all that work. To answer your other question about the cinematography, very early on when I realized we were going to take somewhat of an anthology approach to the material, that really required each of the sections have their own distinct approach, hoping that they would be unified by both the interstitial cards and the score. But it was, I have to say, it was a movie that really evolved a great deal while we were shooting. It evolved a great deal in post-production. There was a lot of restructuring. And I think there's over 35 minutes of edited material that didn't make the film. So it was challenging, but gratifying, especially since the film is bookended by these two elaborate single shots. And that was my way of hoping to give the audience a sense of both introduction and closure. But I have to say, it was, all in all, despite the subject matter, an incredibly fun project to be a part of. We got all the support we needed, and we were free to discover the movie as we went along when necessary. So, yeah, I have a really good job, is what it comes down to. It's the best job I can think of.
What would you say, and also for the actors, that were the things that maybe changed the more during the filming? You mentioned finding things as we were working on this.
I'll let the answers after that.
Well, obviously there was, I think the exciting thing about certainly his job is that, you know, the script is written, it's authored, and then it's reshaped and re-authored in the editing room. I think I may have actually learned the entire first script. and then the changes started to come in. But that's the fun of it. I mean, someone asked me, they said, what is, like MERYL, I've wanted to work with Stephen for a long time. I've admired his work, and so this is, you know, it's my bucket list. You know, I've ticked that box. But someone asked me, they said, what was it like working with Stephen? And I said, what's he like? How does he work? And of course, because as you know, he operates, he lights, so he's the director, the DP. And I said, well, I don't know, it's like he makes the film with a sandbag and an apple box. And we were moving so quickly. I think that for the actor, you know, there are many times where you spend you come in with your mojo working at 7:30 a.m. And then you maybe rehearse or block, and then you have to, occasionally you have to sit around for 2, 3, 4 hours while they light. And you've got to keep the flame, you have to keep the pilot light lit while you're kind of hanging around, because you come in ready to burn, as it were, from the first bar, and then you've got to sit around. There was none of that on this film, and I think I enjoyed I mean, apart from being in great company, Antonio Banderas and MERYL and Stephen, I think I most enjoyed the pace of how we made the movie. Yeah.
Still there?
Ecco, Valentina D'Amico, movieplayer.it. La domanda è per Mr. Soderbergh e Mr. Oldman. Prima abbiamo citato Brecht. Il momento più divertente, secondo me, del film sono i siparietti in cui Gary Oldman e Antonio Banderas si rivolgono allo spettatore spiegandogli le questioni economiche. Volevo sapere come avete lavorato per realizzarli e per renderli così divertenti parlando di mucche e di banane.
When you've got lines like cows and bananas, you don't have to work very hard. I mean, it was all very much. I mean, I could use the word research. You could use curiosity. With something like this, there were things to be learned and things to be read up on, but I chose not to. I'm playing Mossack, but I'm representing a version of Mossack rather than giving a very realistic or naturalistic representing him in that sense, and so I did not work greatly outside the framework of the script, because it was all there. It was on the page. And when you say all the indicators, all the a script is like your map of the world. A really good script tells you where all the stop signs are, where all the B roads are, and so it was all. The humour was baked into the script.
I'd like for Jake to chime in on this, because this is obviously very different from your book. And so, how much did you participate to the transformation and the adaptation in the way in the film?
I had the good fortune to work with Scott Burns, the screenwriter, throughout the entire process. And Scott used me as a resource and to ask questions. They really, both Scott and Stephen really wanted to understand this world and sort of what the parameters of it were and what was realistic and what wasn't. Their attention to detail was amazing and wonderful. And there's a very similar spine both in the movie and in my book, in that in my book I use the Panama Papers to tell the story of this system. This financial system that is subterranean and that exists in the world and through which literally trillions of dollars flows, much of it illicit money from money laundering and things like that. And what they did was they used the characters of Ramon Fonseca and Jürgen Mosek to sort of personify that, right? So they are their guides to this world. And they're charming and funny and wonderful guides and very entertaining. And so in some ways there was a lot of similarity in that respect. But it was just, I visited the set and got to see some of what Gary and MERYL are talking about, and it was just a joy. I mean, Stephen runs a wonderful set. It's fast-paced. Everybody's super professional and really good at what they do, and it was just it was great.
There is a freedom, Stephen, to the way you're making films these days. Not only you make them fast, you make them you make them energetically. You make them in different formats. You have a subject that interests you. I'm thinking of the film on basketball that you did. This is a movie about a conversation of the moment, rich and the poor. I remember Contagion we had here, an informant. Can you talk a little bit about how do you feel your relationship with cinema in terms of your choice of subject right now?
Well, I think the advances in technology have allowed me to optimize a process that early on I felt wasn't moving at the pace that was beneficial to the project. Ultimately, I felt that there were elements beyond my control kind of hijacking the process away from me. Now, with the ability to travel light and quickly, I can use the camera as a pen, essentially, and write it in real time. And that's just a better way of working for me. That's not a better way of working for everybody. But I found through some unsuccessful endeavors that I work best when I have to work quickly, when I have to work intuitively, when it's almost like a sport. I've done my homework, so there's nothing coming at me that I think I can't get a hold of. But I like that spontaneity. And, the ability to shoot now in available light almost exclusively, to edit the material we shot that day, that night, and look at it. And so I have the movies evolving day to day, and I can see it. It's an incredible benefit. I wish I'd had it when I was younger. I would have made better movies.
Stephen and I just finished a movie. Stephen and I just finished a movie that was made in 13 days. And it's almost like I feel he's an artist for this time, because time is accelerated from when we used to take 6 months to make a movie. And then you'd edit it for 6 months, and it would come out a year later. We're living in a moment where the news cycle is racing, and we're racing to keep up with current events. And this is an entertaining, flash, funny way of telling a very, very dark, black-hearted joke, a joke that's being played on all of us. It's a crime not without victims, and the victims, many of them, are journalists. The reason that this Panama Papers was exported to the world was because of the work of over 300 investigative journalists who got the word of John Doe, the whistleblower at Mossack Fonseca, or who knows from where, out into the world. And Some people died for it. Daphne Caruana Galizia, Maltese journalist, who was investigating someone at the top of the government in Malta. And his connection to the Panama Papers was blown up in her car in front of her home. People died. And people die still to get the word out. That's why this movie is fun, it's funny, but it's really, really, really important.
Thank you for the film, Jeroen Struij's film Belgian, the newspaper De Standaard. A lot of famous and powerful people became exposed by the Panama Papers, and there's even a joke about the director of this movie having some financial assets. And I was thinking about, does it come down to personal responsibility of the elite, or does the system as a whole has to change? Is this actually a question for the four of you?
Oh, I think the system has to change. The UK just enacted legislation that's very interesting. It's called the Unexplained Wealth Order, and they're just bringing their first cases. And it's exactly what it sounds like. They identify people who have extreme wealth that seems to have come from nowhere and who are using that wealth to buy up assets in the UK. And they're starting to go after them. I think that's a really fascinating way to attack this. It saddens me to say I think there's no universe in which that kind of legislation would get enacted in the United States, which begs the question, well, who would be against such a thing? Why would you be against this? Look, I think along with climate change, the kind of corruption that we're discussing is a defining issue of this moment, when you have, in the year 2000, the top 1% controlled a third of the world's wealth. They now control half. So you're essentially looking at maybe 50 people who control more wealth than the bottom 3.5 billion people on the planet. That doesn't seem to me to be a sustainable paradigm, and yet here we are. And I think transparency is the only solution. But you have many parts of the world where the legal system is corrupt, and therefore an ordinary citizen doesn't even have the ability to go after people who are breaking the law or even protest in a way that brings about change. So it's a very troubling time, but speaking about it is the beginning. People have been speaking about it for quite a while, but on occasion, a piece of entertainment, I think, can be a great conversation starter and get people wondering day to day in my everyday life, how am I participating in this?
And you've also got you've got a big platform with Netflix. That's the other thing. I think your question earlier about the big screen or the small screen. For myself, I'm a binger, and I love long form television. And I see the best work, the best acting, the best cinematography, the best writing, and the best directing on TV as well. And that's where I see it. So when you've got, as Stephen said, you've got something that's serious, and you want to get that out to as many people. Back in the day when I started, when it was in the old days, when there was just sort of celluloid and the odd indie film, you might make a remarkable little movie that no one ever saw. No one ever, and you think, well, yeah, it's great. Can art, can cinema, can theatre, can it bring about change? Well, yeah, if people see it. So I think this new age that we're in with television, this will reach this movie, because of it, will reach a lot of people.
And if I could just add to what both Gary and Stephen are saying, is people think that a tax haven is someplace that's sort of warm and sunny and has palm trees. And what Gary says in the movie, as Jürgen Mosek, is absolutely true. One of the biggest tax havens in the world is the United States of America. And there's a lot of vested interest in keeping that system the way it is. Delaware, which is a factory for anonymous shell companies, makes $1 billion a year from that business. And that's something that they fight zealously to protect. But there are transnational gangs and all kinds of malefactors who are using Delaware companies around the world to do terrible things. So it's just about sort of raising awareness and having people demand better of their government and their public servants. And part of that is sort of getting the story out. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this film.
Sorry, we have to finish. So sorry. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.